Hey everybody, it's Eugene Liscio here. Welcome to Click 3D. This is the program where we talk about photogrammetry and how you can use nothing more than a digital camera and some software to create some really compelling 3D models. Today we are going to make a 3D model of this, and it's a wooden sculpture, and we're going to be doing it on a turntable. And I just have an old piece of white wood on here, but I'll explain everything that I'm going to be doing from scratch. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to consider here is just walk you through the process of my thinking when I'm creating a 3D model. And in this case, I always think of the object that I'm working with first, and there's a number of things that I have to consider. So one of them is the size of the object, like how big it is, and if I can do it on a turntable, if I can leave the object stationary and I go around the object, or if I can put it on a turntable and I rotate the object. So in this case, this object is small enough, I can put it on a turntable and I can just move around. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, the other thing that I need to consider on the object is texture. And so you'll see here, I got all these little sort of ripples here, whatever. But when I say texture, I don't mean just geometry. I also mean just the colors, like if there's light spots and dark spots and that sort of thing. And this definitely qualifies. So I shouldn't have any problems with that. I shouldn't have a need for coatings or anything else in that regard. Also, the base here is flat. So this is a solid piece of wood. It's been cut. So I don't really need to do anything at the bottom here. If I just create the model this way, I don't really need to flip it. Okay, so there are some objects like maybe like a shoe or something like that where you can photograph it, with the sole on the turntable, and then after you want to flip it because you want to capture the bottom so you get a full 360 model. But in this case, this is not so important. If I just cut it and make it flat, I can still make a 3D model or 3D print or whatever. That's no problem there. Now, other things that I have to consider with the model here is sort of just the geometry and the form. So the main part, the face and everything else, is not really a problem. I don't have a lot of undercuts, but I do on these this ear section here, or these earlobes. You see like the underneath part. You'll see what I'll be doing in this. I'll probably do this video in two parts. The first part, I will just photograph it normally without flipping or doing anything, and then you'll see what happens. We'll see what kind of details I get, what kind of issues I get. And for the most part, this is actually a really good subject to start with. So if you want to try a turntable, something like this that has a lot of flat texture, not too shiny, a lot of different features, this would be a really good model. So the first consideration of the model itself, it's got some benefits for us, but let's move on to lighting and photography. Okay, so in terms of the camera here, I'm just gonna lift this up here. And this is a Nikon D7100, nothing too crazy or too fancy, but there's three things that I always look at when I shoot with a camera like this. And I'm gonna be shooting in manual mode, always. Well, I shouldn't say always, but if I can in this regard, because it's controlled. I've got lighting, I've got other things around me that I can do. So, but the three things I'm gonna control: ISO. I'm going to turn my ISO down to 100 or less if you have that option on your camera. I'm going to take the aperture, so the f-stop number, and I'm going to increase that as high as possible. And as a result, I'm going to need an extended exposure time. So my shutter speed is going to have to be compensated for. There's no way I'm going to be able to hold this by hand in order to take the photograph. So I definitely will need a tripod to shoot this. So I've got a tripod over here, nice sturdy tripod, and I also have a remote. Okay, so I'm gonna hook up the remote and make sure that when I fire this, I'm just gonna set it up, click this, I won't be touching anything, there won't be any small vibrations or anything else. So in terms of the photography part, the camera's good to go, I need to set it up and everything else, but I also have to think about how I'm going to take the photos. So when I set up the tripod, I'll probably set it up on this side, and I'm going to set it up in different ways or different angles. I'll probably start up something like this, up high, so I'm kind of catching some of the top portion here. If I do it at too low, I'm going to be missing out on some of the top edges. So I want to be above the object a little bit, and I'll do a circle, or I'll move this around like that and like that kind of thing. Okay, so once I do that, I'm going to move the camera lower, and then I'll go again. I'll start moving around like this. Okay, and then I'll put one that's low pointing up a bit, right? Because I want to get underneath some of the features like the nose, the eyelids, and that sort of thing. So that's my plan of attack. And now let's talk about lighting. Okay, so let me just put this camera away so I can talk to you. That goes like here. And in terms of lighting, I've just got like 3 lights here, nothing too fancy. These are just LED lights, and I've sort of spread them around so that I get good coverage on this particular model. So if you go here, if you look at this model from the one camera that's over here, it's fairly well lit, okay? So I'm gonna be out of the way. It's nice, fairly diffuse lighting. There's no like really harsh shadows or anything like that. You don't want hard shadows, okay? That'll be helpful. And I'll always have the camera in the same spot, kind of moving around. So 3-point lighting is really helpful. These are nice, fairly diffuse lights. If you find a problem where you're getting some really harsh lighting, take a big piece of paper, a cloth or whatever, put it in front and try to diffuse the light a little bit, and you know, you'll be okay. So from the lighting standpoint, we're set up. I got my camera. Now it's time to just go ahead and take the photos. So let me get set up and then we'll go from there. Okay, so a couple of things here. This particular turntable is just black, and then I've got like a white background. So there's a bit of contrast between the turntable and the background, and I just don't want to do that. So I found this old piece of wood that's hanging around, and what I'm going to do is use this to cover up the black part, and I'm going to put this up like that. So this is actually what I want to photograph, and let me just check what that looks like in the view. It's not too bad. It's fairly centered. So what I'm interested in here is filling the view as much as possible. And I want to make sure I get this top part. So I'm going to adjust this like this. Now, one thing I notice a lot of people do is when they photograph an object, they leave a lot of the background. And the background isn't helpful. So make sure that you zoom in to the main part of the model and fill up the view as much as possible. The background doesn't help you at all. So there's no sense having that. So anyway, I've gone in, I'm looking at my settings. I'm just gonna take a test shot. I'm on manual mode right now. Let me just have a look through here and set this up. And it looks like I'm a little on the low side. I'm gonna make sure my F number is set at, okay, right now it's F25. My ISO is at 160, I want that down. Okay, I get that at 100. And as expected, it's kind of dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my shutter speed. I'm going to let that go there, something like that. So I'm at about 2 seconds. I'm just going to do a quick test just to see what I get. Okay, so it's hard to see maybe on that camera, but I'm getting a fairly good exposed shot. So what I'm going to do is set up the remote, which is in my back pocket. And I'm going to get the menu here. And I'm going to have this set up so that I can fire this remotely. Where's my remote? Just give me a second. There we go. Remote mode, quick response. Beautiful. Okay, so from here, it's a pretty simple affair. I'm just going to start taking photographs. I'm going to rotate the model, take another photograph, and do this in small chunks. So it looks like I'm pretty good here. I'm going to go to live view. That looks pretty good. And let's try this one here. I already did one. Actually, let me just eliminate that so I can start from scratch. Yeah, there we go. All right, here we go. So I'm gonna take the first one. All right, that's one. I'm gonna rotate a bit, do the next one. And just rinse and repeat, just keep going. I really like using this remote. It just kind of saves you the time of keep looking through, or yeah, that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to finish this round. And if I don't like where it's positioned, I can always move it. So I'm going to move this a bit. I'm going to move this camera over a tiny bit so I get it more centered. There we go. Looks pretty good. Good stuff. Now, in terms of the number of photos, you really just want good overlap. So I usually just move it about, 10 degrees or so, not much more than that. It's just extra photos. It does increase the processing time a little bit, but it's not a big deal. I have more time, I can wait a little bit more as opposed to coming back and realizing you didn't take as many photos. You can always, rework the project again with less photos too, if you want something a little bit more efficient. But this is usually the best way to go. So let's see what happens here. I'm just going to continue on. Okay, so that does it for all the photographs that we have here. Now let's go to the computer. We're going to fire up 3ds Zephyr and we are going to process this model just as is, and let's find out what happens. Let's see what we get. Let's see what's good. Let's see what's bad, where we maybe need to fix some things. And I'm pretty sure there's some things that are going to be problematic, but we can always come back and do that afterwards. But let's head up to the computer. All right, so we are here in 3ds Zephyr and I need to transfer these photos over. So I've got a whole bunch. I am just going to drag and drop them in here. I'm going to move quickly through this because the focus is actually on the model itself. So I'm just going to use the close range and default settings, and I'm going to go ahead and click run, and we'll let that cook, and then I'll come back when that's done and move on to the next step. Okay, so it looks like the sparse reconstruction is done, and you can see most of the model is there. It actually, for whatever reason, there were like 4 or 5 photos that didn't take, but I had enough photos. It's not really a big deal. I could go back and inspect, but that's one of the benefits of just taking a lot of photos here. It should just work. So that was the sparse reconstruction, just making sure we can reconstruct the cameras. I'm just going to go ahead and do the dense point cloud, and I'm going to just use close range. I'm just going to use the default. In fact, I might even just use, well, let me use the default setting, and then we'll go back, and I will be back when that's done, and we'll see what that looks like. Okay, so we're back here and I'm looking at the dense point cloud. So you can see that it makes a fairly thorough model, but let's look at what may potentially be a problem for us going forward when we start creating a mesh. Well, one thing is you can see that on the edges of the model here, we get a little bit of bleed from the background. Okay, so there's some pixels that are coming up as white and the color is bleeding into the model. So that's something we don't want, or we want to try and avoid. The other thing is down at the bottom, we're picking up a little bit of the base, which is fine, but I'd like you to notice the earlobes here along the edges. We're getting the same kind of thing where we're getting this bleeding of colors. So that's something that we might want to fix, or something that if we are going to go forward and just create a mesh from this, which I'll do actually just to show you what happens if you don't do any editing or anything like that, what will actually happen. Now there are ways to edit this out. Maybe what I'll do is I'll leave that for another video because I don't want this to get overly lengthy in terms of this first video. But let's just go ahead and create a mesh, and then let's look at what happens with some of these areas here. I mean, the main part looks pretty good, but again, if we really want to get picky, we got to start looking at these small little areas. So let me go to mesh extraction, and I'm just going to do a okay, so let me just go to mesh extraction, and I'm just going to go ahead to the dense point cloud, close range. I'm going to do default here, go next, and click on run. And we'll be back in a little bit when this is done. Okay, so we're done the mesh extraction, and let's have a look at the model and see what we've got here. We get in close, we see it looks pretty good. So on the top here, there's not so much of the color has been left over, so there's been an improvement there, which is great. Down at the bottom, you know, we do have a flat base, which is good, but you'll see around the earlobes here, we've got a problem. And so we're, you know, the mesh is trying to connect, and we're getting some of the color bleed there. And if I go underneath, you'll see that I've got a bit of a hole here, and even under the lips, I've got a little bit of a problem, right? So now there are things that we can do to sort of clean some of this up, but the issue is always going to be that we're going to have hole, right? So where we get a hole over here, we can fill this up with some mesh filter tools, but we're not going to be able to clean the color and that sort of thing. So what could I have done to fix this? Well, I can always go back and take more photographs, and what I need to do is take photographs sort of at an angle that's a little bit lower, okay? That's one thing I could do. Another potential solution to this would be to take the whole model and then sort of lie it flat on the back, and then I'd have full access to the bottom here. Right, so the base would be exposed, and I could take photographs. I can get close up, especially where these earlobes are, and I could photograph those really, really well to get rid of this problem with the mesh. So that's kind of where I want to stop right now, and what I may do in the next video is look at how we can improve this, maybe try a few additional techniques, and even masking is possible. So I could rotate this, mask the images, and you'd see how that would be much improved. So let's leave it at that for now. We have a pretty good looking model. I haven't even done the final texture. That's still available to be done to get a really, really nice quality model. But if you look at the mesh, it looks quite nice. Let me get into the, sorry about that. Let me get into the meshed model here. All right, there we go. And I'm going to get into the wireframe. So you'll see really, really fine wireframe there that I really don't need. It's really, really crazy there. So I could probably just stick with a meshed model the way it is, and refine it a bit later on, because it's got a lot of polygons and there's no need to have that much data. Anyway, let's leave it at that and watch for the next video to see what we do to fix this. So I decided it was a good idea to just go back and take a few more images, and so what I did was I rotated the sculpture on its back and even on the sides just to capture some different angles. I'm going to process this again and show you the difference, because I think that might be important to see how you can improve this. So let's give it a shot. So what I'd like to do is actually just go through the photographs and give you an idea of what I've done here. These are the originals that I had taken, and here where you see the model, the sculpture is up on its side. That's the one that we've, I've taken some photos here, really focusing in on these lobes here and where we're having some problems. So I've rotated around. You see I got it on one side here, taken some images, then I've sort of put it on its side, and taken some more images, and then I flipped it one more time and taken other images. And that's going to really help get the underside of the earlobes here. Now, I've already processed this inside of 3ds Zephyr, but you can notice some things right off the bat when you combine all of the photographs. Down here at the bottom, well, when I had holes before, you can see that I have a lot of sparse points here now. So that's going to help the reconstruction big time. So even the earlobes, I don't get a lot of that white bleeded colors and that sort of thing. These are a little bit more crisp here now. So I expect that I'm going to get something a bit better. So let's have a look at the dense point cloud and bring that up. Okay. So this is the dense point cloud, and right off the bat, if you remember what we had originally, there was a lot of white points here, much more noisy, and this is much crisper right off the bat. The bottom here is filled, underneath the chin here is filled, the bottom lip where we had some problems with just color and texture and that sort of thing, that looks much better. So you can see just by rotating the model, it's much, much better. At the top, we're getting this about the same. I really didn't take a lot of photographs at the top, so there's still a lot of these white points there, but even then that worked out okay. Now I tried a couple things with the meshes, but basically this is the bare mesh, and right off the bat, just have a look at the ears, the problems where we had with missing parts and that sort of thing, big time improved. And so by rotating the model on the turntable, getting a different angle here, this has helped significantly. And I've done it as a textured mesh, so I've actually applied the texture, and you can see here this is much crisper, and I think this is just a low poly texture, so there's nothing fancy here. This can be improved for sure. You can see I have a little bit of bleeding here of colors, and it could be a little bit crisper, but I just took a few extra photos and it made a huge improvement on the model. So you can tell right off the bat, if you go in, take some extra photos, make sure you get all these areas that have little undercuts or, you know, sharp corners and things like that. You really need to get in close and get in at different angles if you really want to improve the model. Now, if I didn't care, you know, there's some things I can do with editing and that sort of thing, but why? It's just so easy to take extra photos and just make a much more complete model. So you can see here how the process is from start to finish, taking photographs, processing. At the beginning I set up the photographs and the lighting and that sort of thing, but this model looks pretty good here. I'm quite happy with the result. If I wanted to make this into a 3D print, the geometry is quite good for something like that with a little bit of touch up. So thanks a lot for watching Click 3D, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.